I have been struck by the lack of a future's becoming in the English language. There is no future participle in the English language. I find this lack to indeed force a certain lack of imagination, a lack of being able to hear or speak a future's future. It is almost as if we must shift where and how we see what a future even is. To help us begin to untangle these conceptual knots that the English language binds us in, you might find us silenced, institutionalized, or in past futures. As our postcards tomorrow will index Michal El-Gargawi, Noah Rafford, and Yasmina Regard. Tomorrow we will also cinematically move through the desert landscapes of dystopic hope in our conversation with Sophia El-Maria and Lauren Bucas. Or we might even realize new forms of contemporary science fiction in Arabic with Emirati writers Noura Al-Noman and Mohammed Al-Hamdi. Also lined up for tomorrow is a meditation on the impact of the cloud and all of its spatial memory and violent histories, as we are joined by, hopefully, better microphones, and Joao Ribas, and his take on a future was a cloud. Once we recognize the spatial element to the concept of future becomings, we are able to move beyond the limits of verbal language. This is what makes our final guest for this evening, Christine Sun Kim's presentation, so very remarkable and transformative for all of us. Christine Sun Kim uses the medium of sound through technology, performance, and drawing to investigate her relationship with sound and spoken languages. If you would join me in welcoming with applause, here we go, with applause, Christine Sun Kim for The Future Was.
Well, hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? There's no mic problems? All right. So now when I was invited to give a talk tonight about the future, I got really excited because I thought, what great timing actually, because last year I was working on a lot of drawings that dealt with the future, so I was very excited to be able to talk about them. Now, before I go into my drawings, I want to talk a bit about my background. I was born in the United States, but my family moved from Korea a year before I was born. So I grew up in a very dominantly Korean household, but I also grew up in an American culture where we were told that we have a big future, we've got big plans for our country, big promises. You know, it felt a lot like pep talks growing up. And I also felt like there was an emphasis on our past and that we had a history, and I knew that meant that we had a great future. But the impact of that didn't really resonate until I had the opportunity to visit other countries. I moved to Berlin 2 years ago, and it hit me that European countries have more of a history that's rich and in-depth and VASTFUL and PASTFUL. And then I actually had the chance to be in Beijing for a month last year, and I could feel the weight of that history, of the language, of the food, of the culture, of the tradition, of rituals. And really that got me to think about the more in the past you can go, the more I realized the future you can go, because the more you can measure backwards, the more you can measure forwards. And now, when you think about it, the United States is only 240 years old, and interestingly enough, American Sign Language came over from French Sign Language and eventually got mixed in with local sign languages to become American Sign Language in the 1880s. So ASL is only about 200 years old as a close sibling of the United States. And when I talk about the future in American Sign Language, it seems to be a bit abstract. It's expressed in American Sign Language, which is a youthful, young language. But I realize that I must kind of explain to you how ASL works before I move on. If you think about American Sign Language as a language, there's all these different parts of grammar, of syntax, of components, and let's just say they become the fingers on your hands. Expressionism is on one finger, your tone is on another, the speed of conversation, and all of a sudden you have dexterity in language. If you think about English language, however, it's quite linear. You put a sentence together and it's done. But American Sign Language is all these components, you can play with them, and that gives you dexterity. But when you want to say sentence in ASL, you must play all your fingers on the piano at the same time and create a chord. And once you have all of your fingers playing all the notes, you have that chord, you've expressed your idea. But if you want to change just one note, move one finger over to a different key, that changes the entire context. The sentence is completely different. And I've got an example of just what one finger can do with a sign. Now, this one finger concept indicates to walk. And I'm wanting to give you some examples so you can see how just one change, one note, one shift can really make a different sentence. So again, this finger I'm indicating embodies a person. I walk normally. I walk happily. I walk sluggishly. I walk hurriedly. Right? You know that one. You walk into me. You walk towards me aggressively. You walk around me suspiciously. You walk in unexpectedly. You turn and walk out. We walk into each other. We walk past each other. And if you think about that, that's like you have one note, but you can play it differently. You can play it roughly, smoothly, softly, quickly, and it's just one note, one sign, but if you just make a minor change, it has so many different meanings. Now, this is a bit of a manual system for the signs. So 1H means one hand and 2H means two hands. Before we go into the future, I still need to tease you a little bit more with some drawings of the past. Typically in American Sign Language, you use space to indicate grammar. See, as I'm standing here, this is the present. If you go behind the body, it indicates the past. And if you go in front of the body, it indicates future. And these are 4 different past tense. The top one, a long time ago. Past. Used to. The last one is my favorite. It's very romantic. You can really make a grand gesture. It requires 2 hands. Once upon a time. Now, this is something I did for a magazine in China. It's called Leap, and so I just wanted to take a strip to show you some of the work I did with that. But you can see that it's the same sign, and I start by my head for the sign future, which is the sign for future. Again, you're moving forward. It's in the future. And I like how you can time travel as quickly as moving your hand forward or backwards. You have that ability to go from the past to the present to the future, and of course it depends on your hand movements as well. Now this has a very strong ASL tone. The word finish, when you sign it, indicates the past. So when you say finish in sign language, it indicates something that's already happened. So if you sign sleep, finish, that means I slept. If you sign I eat, finish, that means I ate. And so you see very finish means very far in the past. In some ways, I feel like the farther the past gets from you, the more physical it becomes. And then you've just finished. That's right behind me. It just completed. And then my body is in the now, the square, or the rectangle. And then you have soon future, which is coming up. And then future, far, it means it's very far away. Now I'm going to show you the sign for will, but the sign for will has three meanings. One shows choice, determination, willingness, desire. The second one is a legally binding document, a will. And then the third is an expression in the future tense. And that's the one I'd like to address. Zero future is shown like will. I will. A normal future is the proper sign. I will. I will. And now one stretched out sign for will indicates something far in the future. It's a bit of a visual pun with sign language and words. Now, 3 wasn't enough. I thought I needed 5. And I wanted to turn something in from a potential future into something that had no future. And now I have the line here, which indicates the physicality and where the placement of the sign takes place. So we have 5 futures. One is will, no. Soon, will. Will. Then there's never will, and no will. And that gives you a range of futures. This is actually one of my favorite drawings. I feel like you have to have 3 parts for future in order to create a complete sign for future. You have the first part, which is the palm movement, signing future, but you can't move your hand without moving your elbow, so the elbow has a future. And then the third part is your mental commitment to the future. And in coordinating all 3 parts gives you a future. Otherwise, it's an empty future. So when I thought about the future a lot and over again, it really became fragmented to me. I felt like there's 2 parts. There was the close future, which I labeled as the future. And then the second semicircle felt like it became a future. Like the farther away it gets from you, the less sure you are about it. It's kind of a glass half empty view. It's a future that can be taken from you. It's not anything that's guaranteed. And it creates a feeling of doubt and uncertainty and creates a personality of somebody who isn't too confident. But don't worry, I still have the glass half full version for you. Now this feels like a straight up future, the future. And then when you get further away, instead of uncertainty, I've replaced it with hopefulness. There's a future. Fingers crossed. But when I think about future, I do the same 2 semicircles, and I think of that drawing in the air, and I feel like I'm copying and pasting the semicircles. And instead of having one in front of the other, why don't I just stack them on top of each other? A clean, clear future. Straight to work, straight to business. Now, I think this might be very basic to human nature when people talk about their future. People say, I want a job, I want a house, I want to be famous, I want to make money, I want kids. those kind of things that every person hopes for in their futures. So I have these futures being indicated, being generic, things we share. Now this is one of my favorite musical symbols, piano, which indicates quiet when you're playing an instrument. And the more piano symbols you have, the quieter the note is played. So I've overlapped the two of those things. I have a quiet future. And you can see there's not as many semicircles. It's a bit straight across. It's like some sad humps. But at the same time, it's quiet, but can you hear me now? Okay. Back on. Okay. Quiet. Okay. Let's go for it. Do you want to sit closer to me? Should she sit closer to me? No. I don't. No, it's everyone says. Okay. So the quiet future is also something that feels steady and assured and fixated. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It just feels consistent and constant. This could indicate 6 people's futures together or 6 different plans for the future. Future, okay. When I was thinking about, When I was thinking about the future, I was also thinking about how sound can be an intangible concept, as can the future. There's nothing physical about either idea or practice or concept. So then I thought about how I understand sound and how I'm able to understand what sounds are taking place by watching people's behavior. People become my speakers. When I'm at a restaurant, I'm seated at a table, if I see people's eyes kind of glancing around, I get the indication that there's some noise in the background, nothing too specific, but something's happening in the background. But if I see everybody's gaze and face shift in one position, I follow like a blind sheep. What happened? Was it a car accident? Is somebody fighting? I know that there's an abrupt noise because I'm able to mirror sound through people's behaviors, which is why I have these staff lines here without notes. Sometimes I feel like the staff lines in music and my drawings show sound better than notes would, because when you have notes, I have people's reactions. And the same practice happens when I use an interpreter as well. And I just want to show some empty staff lines that I've created. You can tell which lines hold more sound than others. Some lines are smoother than others, and then there's a gap. That means I have no feedback. I'm not given anything from people's behavior. I don't have any indications of sound. And in this, I feel like the future is there. I just have to trust that it's there, or that it is there. I just don't see it. I just depend on the staff lines. Now, forte is the symbol for loud, being the opposite of piano. And the more forte symbols you have, the louder the notes get. And that to me makes sense, because when I thought about forte, I realized that the symbol of F is the first letter in future, and piano has P, the first letter in past. Now, sometimes when I think about the future and a loud future, I feel like it's always changing, it's responsive, it's got a very short lifespan. So I pictured it in one breath. What it would be like to take a huge breath, hold it in, sign future until you can't hold your breath anymore and you have to exhale. And that's where the future ends. Look at this overly ambitious future. Obviously, I think everyone responds well to this and identifies. This would be signed like future, shooting to the roof. This is also one of my favorite drawings. So you see there's one F1 future, and all of a sudden it ups its game to 4 futures. You know that's go future or go home. One semi-hump into the next. This is a nice one, I think, when a future trips and falls. But you see the RH that indicates right hand. And the sign is like this, watch. It circles back and comes back to the head, so it's like the future trip and fell, but got back up again. And you can cycle that. I think it's nice. It's kind of like a good problem to have. You get another chance. You can start over. You are forgiven. Like I mentioned before, finish indicates a verb in the past, so it's putting future out of business, or it's killing the future to bring it to the present. It removes the distance from future to bring it back to the body and make it into the present. So if you follow the lines, that indicates the hand motion, and you sign finish, done. The sign for when the future briefly pauses and moves on to the next semicircle. I mean, all futures need a break, and so do I. And so does my interpreter, Beth. She needs to rest her voice. So thank you very much. Thank you.